Joining me today to look through all those are the director of the Free Speech Union, Inaya Folarin Iman, and Adam Elliott-Cooper, who's a researcher and associate at the University of Greenwich. Well, nice to see you both. Do you think, Inaya, that we are heading into a national lockdown by stealth? Certainly seems more areas are being considered for Tier 3.
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot of evidence to show that, but I think it is very concerning if that is the case. It seems that we haven't necessarily learned many of the mistakes from the first one. There is obviously significant economic damage, and there's many people reporting in front pages and in the newspaper pages today that deaths from other conditions are on the increase. And so if the government is taking the strategy of imposing a lockdown by the back door, but not confronting it and being transparent to the people, then I think that's going to be very alarming, and it's not clear that there's actually any evidence that that's really going to work, or we're just delaying the inevitable.
Adam, the difference, of course, this time is, first of all, that the government's not taking the lead on imposing lockdowns, saying it's leaving it to local areas. And secondly, the support package is not as big as it was last time round.
I think the support package is really the main issue here. So we're seeing huge numbers of people going back into lockdown, but the government not providing the kind of resources that people need in order to be able to self-isolate if they're found to have COVID-19, or have the kind of economic and social support that they need if they're going into lockdown. This is further, I think, problematised by the fact that we're not seeing businesses supported in the way that that's needed if we're going to have the economy not completely tank in the coming months and years. And so I think we should be looking at similar kinds of economies like that in Germany, which have promised quite substantive support schemes, both for businesses and for individuals, if we want to, on the one hand, ensure that people remain safe during this lockdown period, but also, importantly, ensuring that the economy remains safe as well.
And do you think there needs to be a more comprehensive support package?
I mean, if the government is going to take this strategy that it appears to be doing, which is, imposing a kind of lockdown by the back door, then obviously there does need to be stronger protections for people that are going to be forced to make that decision. But ultimately, I don't think that's the most fundamental issue in regards to this strategy. I think it's whether or not the strategy itself is actually effective, whether or not it's going to achieve the things that it's setting out to do, which is to reduce the spread of COVID-19. And as we had a national lockdown already, and many people in this community spirit took it on the chin and actually went along with it, I think a lot of the lack of faith and lack of trust at the moment is whether or not these things are actually going to work. So the economic protection is one element, but whether or not this strategy is effective, for me, is the much more fundamental question.
And what do you think of those two columns, Adam, by Zoe Williams and Rachel Sylvester, both basically arguing that the government has lost the trust of the British people, and therefore, whatever it says, a lot of us aren't going to take much notice?
I think that's completely right. I think that the government have demonstrated, not only through individual kind of scandals, through members of parliament and other significant political figures not sticking to the rules that they expect the rest of the country to stick by, but also through the fact that they're not providing the kind of support that people need if they're diagnosed with COVID-19 and they have to self-isolate for 14 days. If you have to self-isolate for 14 days because you shouldn't be spreading the virus, there should be government support to ensure that you can pay your rent, that you can pay your bills, that you can feed your family. But the fact that the government isn't even affording people these fundamental this fundamental kind of aid in this moment of crisis, I think should be unsurprising, therefore, that people have absolutely no faith in this government's ability to really care for its citizens.
Have you lost trust in the government, Inaya?
I think, the way that the strategy has been handled over the last few months, not even just the last couple of weeks, has been really alarming. There's been a lot of confusion, a lot of mishmash, and just the opaqueness, I think, has been one of the most concerning things. And my main concern, as I've already alluded to, is whether or not this is actually going to work. People are taking a massive personal and professional risk and financial one in relation to their families. We're already coming up to winter now, where there's other things that we're considering, whether that's from Halloween to Christmas and all of these things. And if we're still going along this very one-track minded perspective, when there's no guarantee or no security financially or whether or medically that this is actually going to be effective, then I think that this is going to be incredibly, incredibly damaging for the government going into the new year.
Now, away from COVID and indeed away from Brexit, got an interesting column by the international commentator in the Financial Times about Taiwan, saying that China is upping the rhetoric about possibly trying to take back Taiwan into the ambit of communist China. I mean, Adam, is this the sort of thing that worries you, or do you just think, it affects a country a long way away of which we know relatively little?
I think we should all be concerned by the way in which the United States is engaging in different kinds of foreign policy to influence countries far away from both ourselves and itself. And I think that we should be erring on the side of caution as to whether they would be defending Taiwan because they want to defend democracy or human rights, or whether it simply is in their national interest, their personal economic interest, to try to hold back the influence of an economic power like China. And so while I think it is important that we keep an eye on ensuring that there is peace and stability in this part of the world, I'm unsure if the United States is necessarily the best power to ensure that peace and stability, given its track record in foreign policy endeavours in places like the Middle East and Latin America.
What do you think, Inaya? I mean, Taiwan is a democracy, mainland China isn't. Perhaps we should think about trying to defend it as well.
Well, I'm quite concerned about what Adam said, that the focus is on, American foreign policy. The reality is that, China has been squashing democratic protests in Hong Kong, and where there's a lot of information in relation to the Uyghurs that many people are incredibly alarmed about. And notwithstanding the way that they handled COVID-19 in the early days, I think that when we're thinking about kind of hegemony on the global stage, I would much rather put my faith in a freedom-loving democracy like America than necessarily China alone. And so I think that yes, a distracted America is concerning for kind of peace globally. And I think that actually Donald Trump has been quite effective in standing up to perhaps much of the excesses of China. And so I think that actually we should be putting our faith in one of our closest allies, America, to support freedom of democracy around the world.
Adam, do you want a quick comeback?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the freedom-loving democracy of America isn't really much to the million-odd Iraqis who are dead, to the thousands, tens of thousands who were killed by the bombing of Libya, to the thousands who have been killed.
But are you saying on Taiwan we should just let China have it?
I think that the United States, given their track record on foreign policy, is not the power that should be making these kinds of interventions, because we can see from their track record that their interventions lead to more chaos, lead to more destruction, and lead to more death.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed. Well, this is All Out Politics.